Wow, what a performance from Renato Moicano. Welcome back to the channel, guys. We're going to be doing another episode of 5 Things We Learned, this time looking at the main event from UFC Paris, Renato Moicano against Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, if you're new to the channel, make sure you do subscribe, but also let me tell you about this series that we do. So, 5 things we've learned. We put up these 5 blank boxes, and as we go through the video, we reveal one thing at a time that we learned from this fight. Also, some exciting news for UFC fans. I was working on a boxing event in Sheffield at the weekend alongside Nick Pete, who of course does the UFC content over here for TNT, and we had a chat, and he'll be coming on the channel sometime soon. We just need to get a date in the diary, but we'll probably do some more dream matchup content, general thoughts on different divisions, so make sure you subscribe and look out for that. Anyway, let's get into UFC Paris, the main event, Renato Moicano against Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, Moicano was an underdog heading into this fight, but you would not have thought it. From the very first bell, what a performance. He just completely dominated that first round. I know that Bisping in the commentary was making a case for a 10-7 round, and you know what? That's as close to a 10-7 round as you will probably get. Benoit Saint-Denis offered nothing coming backwards. Moicano took him down, dominated the grappling, and it was just a dominant display. We're going to get into the specifics shortly, but just hats off to Moicano. He's just continuing this 6-fight win streak. Amazing performance, amazing event really. So let's stop messing around, let's get into the first thing we learned, and that is that Renato Moicano simply has some of the very best grappling for MMA. From the first bell, this was on display. Not only did he take down Benoit Saint-Denis with ease, he also dealt with the potential sweep. We all know that Benoit Saint-Denis has great butterfly hooks that he uses to elevate his opponent and then get back onto his feet. But that just wasn't going to work with Moicano. He's far too technical. He also recognised that when Benoit Saint-Denis puts in those butterfly hooks, tries to turn and stand up, he is exposing his back. And Moicano was just so slick. He just hopped on it, got his hooks in, got the body triangle, and that was pretty much the story for the rest of the round in terms of grappling. I've not even got onto the ground and pound yet. But that body triangle was so effective. Even when Saint-Denis would turn, he was just putting Moicano straight into mount, and then the ground and pound. This ground and pound was exactly what MMA grappling should be. It should be taking down the opponent, establishing a dominant position, and then being ruthless with the elbows, the punches coming down, picking your shots, and also not being afraid to take a risk. Too many grapplers are terrified of throwing strikes when they're on top, because when you're on top, you want to smother the opponent, give no gaps. The guy on the bottom wants a gap. He wants the smallest gap to explode out of, to escape and get back onto his feet. When you're striking from top position, you have to allow a certain gap, because you have to get your posture up, you have to lift an arm up if you're throwing strikes, throwing elbows, so there is slight risk in that. However, it needs to be a calculated risk and a risk that you're willing to take. Look, ultimately you could finish the fight with these strikes, and as we saw, we can compare it to the co-main event before. He could have got Imavov out of there in the first round. His grappling was so dominant. If he'd put some solid strikes together, he could have won that fight. Instead, he tired himself out, lost the next couple of rounds. But anyway, we're not talking about that co-main event. We're talking about Moicano getting Benoit Saint-Denis down, controlling him with his grappling, and then devastating ground and pound. The fight could have been finished a couple of times probably. You know, he wasn't great defensively because so many strikes were getting through, but his pure toughness, he was still trying to escape position. All credit to Benoit Saint-Denis, but Renato Moicano gave a perfect example of how grappling in MMA should look. It should look like grappling to take an opponent down, control them, and then use your strikes to either get them out of there or cause some serious damage. And that's what Moicano did here. The elbows cut Benoit Saint-Denis. You could see lumps over his face, over his head. And look, it ultimately led to him winning the fight with a doctor's stoppage in round 2. So the first thing that we learned is that Moicano's grappling for MMA is up there with the best of them in the sport. That is no exaggeration, it is up there. The second thing we learned is just how tough Benoit Saint-Denis is. Look, that first round was horrific. He threw nothing back. It was all one-way traffic from Moicano. But for Benoit Saint-Denis to get up, come out of the second round and have a pretty good second round with one working eye is nothing short of incredible, and I cannot have enough respect for these athletes. They put their bodies on the line every single weekend for our entertainment, and you just have to applaud Benoit Saint-Denis' efforts for this fight. But Look, he got caught cold first round, taken down, brutalized on the bottom, but he still came out. He's so tough, but he did also show gaps in his bottom game. He was getting a lot of credit before this fight about his butterfly hooks, how good they are to elevate his opponent and get back upstairs. However, when you are exposing your back like that, as we just mentioned, Renato Moicano will take advantage of it. Taking nothing away from his durability, his toughness, we know that Benoit Saint-Denis is a super tough guy, but I think that he depends on that physicality a little bit too much. I'm sure he's got great technique, but it seems that when he's in there, he does rely on the strength. You know, he tried to push Moicano off him at times when maybe using his hips could have been a more effective strategy at getting back onto his feet. But he's really tough almost to his own detriment, and I really hope that this fight hasn't caused long-lasting damage to Benoit Saint-Denis, because that first round is the sort of round that can change a person. So the second thing we learned is that, yes, whilst Benoit Saint-Denis is tough, he's as tough as they come, he perhaps relies too much on that toughness, too much on the physicality, where his technique is slightly lagging behind. I think he's got all the potential because he has that mental toughness, he has that mindset. However, he really needs to make sure that he's not over-reliant on being tough to compete with the elite of the division. And we're coming back to Renato Moicano for the third thing that we learnt in this fight. And it's that Renato Moicano and his team, their game management was fantastic. Game management, big tick. And of course, I'm talking about the second round. Now, this second round, incredibly, could have been won by Benoit Saint-Denis. He actually probably landed the bigger shots, did some nice work to the body. But that was all in Renato Moicano's plan. Moicano went for a couple of takedown defense. They were quite half-hearted. But other than that, he was relying on the jab. He knew that Benoit Saint-Denis' eye was closing up. So he just worked the jab, kept connecting with the eye, knowing that by the end of the round, his eyesight would either completely be gone from that eye, or the doctor would have to step in and stop it. I have absolutely no problems with Renato Moicano taking that approach in this round. Some people might be criticising him for it, but I think it was perfect game management. He was never really putting himself at any risk. He was working the range really nicely. And more importantly, he didn't either A, gas himself out, or B, get caught by any silly shots. We've seen it so many times before. After a dominant first round, a fighter go for the kill in the second round and either get caught by something that they just didn't see happening or tire themselves out, and that leaves them vulnerable. You know how it is. When you're tired, your decision making gets worse, everything becomes a bit sloppier, and against such a dangerous opponent like Benoit Saint-Denis, Moicano just had no reason to take those chances. I think it was brilliant game management in that second round. Had Benoit Saint-Denis come out for the third, I'm sure Moicano would have turned it up again, but there was absolutely no need. He could concede that second round, work the jab, damage that eye more, and then, should Benoit Saint-Denis come out for the third round, he'd just put the pace back on him and do some real damage. However, he didn't need to do that. The doctor stepped in, the fight was quite rightly stopped, and Renato Moicano just showed us his maturity, his game management, and these are the attributes that you really need to be a top level fighter. Renato Moicano has really made a statement with this win. Now, the fourth thing that we learned, I always struggle saying that, the fourth thing that we learnt is that the UFC Paris crowd was absolutely fantastic. All night, you know, it's these European crowds. I know I'm biased, but the UK fans, the French fans, they are just unbelievable. The singing, it gives you goosebumps. The singing, it really lifts the fighters up. It lifts the whole atmosphere. The commentators get more into it. I do think the American fans have something to learn from us in that regard. The songs do make a difference. You know, the booing or cheering, whichever side you're on. I know that some fighters genuinely love the boos, and you could see with Brian Battle. We're not going to get into the post-fight interviews, by the way, on this video. You know, we talk about 5 things we learned. So even the fighters, they love it, whether they get booed or cheered. It just ramps everything up. It makes you feel as though there's more at stake. So we learned that the UFC needs to have another event soon in Paris. Definitely another event soon in the UK at a sociable hour, where we can really all get up for it, you know, not a main card ring walk at 5 a.m. But anyway, that's the fourth thing we learned, that the UFC Paris crowd were absolutely fantastic. What an event. Now, the fifth thing that we learned, and there's been rumours circulating about this for weeks now, so it's come as no real surprise, but it's looking like the next opponent for Renato Moicano is Paddy Pimblett. This fight makes complete sense. Pimblett coming off that fight against Bobby Green, Renato Moicano on a tear, gaining in popularity. It's two stars of the sport right now coming together at the perfect time. Renato Moicano has never been more popular. Paddy Pimblett's got a huge following already. It's just a fight that makes complete sense, both in terms of the rankings and in terms of the name value. Now, how I think that fight would go is another question. I'll definitely do a breakdown video for that when it's officially announced. But it's a really tricky one. Both guys are super good on the ground. Their striking is good. Paddy's a bigger guy naturally. Paddy could never make featherweight in a million years. And of course, Moicano used to be a featherweight. But I think it's a very, very competitive fight. Also, there are talks about it potentially being an Ultimate Fighter series, which I'd like to see. I admit I've completely lost interest in the Ultimate Fighter over the last few years. I think the format does need some rejigging, some refreshing. But anyway, I would see that one. I think it'd be entertaining. Moicano's hilarious. Paddy Pimblett's funny, you know, he's got good banter. I don't think the build-up would be full of animosity. I think it'd be funny, good banter between them. I'd definitely be up for watching that one. But it does seem as though Renato Moicano, Paddy Pimblett, hopefully in the UK, possibly in Brazil, who knows. But I'd love to see that fight. So they're the 5 things that we learned from Moicano against Saint-Denis. I thought it was a great fight for as long as it lasted in terms of pure domination from Moicano. He really put the lightweight division on notice. He's like, look, if you come to the ground with me, this is the control I can do. That control was just unbelievable. Not only was it great control, it was also damaging. And I just really hope that the rest of the UFC roster recognise how effective they can be if they choose to take some more risks from top position. I'm not calling anyone out. I love a variety of styles. However, you cannot argue that that kind of grappling is as exciting as it gets. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know if there's anything else you learnt during this fight. As I said, hopefully the video with Nick Peet will be out in the next couple of weeks. I'll also be doing a breakdown, maybe making a case for Khalil Roundtree having a chance against Alex Pereira. That could come out next week. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. Make sure you subscribe and I'll see you guys later.